I wanted to take a moment. If you are under the age of 18, can you just make a noise of some sort? Are you under 18? Yeah. Okay. That's pretty good. Now, if you're under the age of 18, can you try to make a bigger noise? Ready? 1, 2, 3, go. There we go. Okay. Good. You're here. You're seen. We're so happy you're with us today. And I'm going to actually tell a quick story from my childhood. As many of us know, slowing down can be really hard to do. Slowing down in life, slowing down in just the way we're thinking and what we're thinking about. And when I was a kid, my dad, I'm someone who moves quickly. I'm rushed, right? I'm that type of personality. And I think my dad was technically that personality too, but he, for some reason, figured it out pretty early as a dad. And so anytime we would go somewhere, he would just want to leave ridiculously early, like terribly early. And I'm like, Dad, I don't want to be there early. Like, that's not my thing, you know? Like, I have time to keep watching what I'm watching or doing what I'm doing. And so we'd be getting ready and be like, it's time to go. And I'm like, we don't have to be there for like another 45 minutes and it's like 10 minutes away. Like, what are you talking about? It's time to go, right? But here's what he said all the time to me. He said, I just don't want us to have to feel rushed. And when I was a kid, and even in my teen years, it's like, what's wrong with you, man? Like, feel rushed? Like, this is crazy, right? Like, why? And my dad, I think had figured something out that rather than feel rushed, he could just plan ridiculously far ahead and go and kind of mosey into whatever the next thing was. And that didn't rub off on me, but I want it to. Like, I really want it to, right? He would also do this other thing. He would park in a parking lot, and there'd be plenty of parking near the front, but guess where he would park? He'd park in the back. And I'm like, what are you doing, man? Like, we're right. Well, getting your steps in every day, it's a good idea. Like, we're not in a hurry, right? And I just remember thinking, you're why? Like, what are you thinking, right? Now, as a 40-year-old and a dad, like, I'm kind of like, you know what? He was probably right. And sometimes you don't quite get why parents do what they do, but then eventually you might come back and say, you know what? They were actually right about that thing. And my dad was right about pace. My dad was right about taking time. My dad was right about slowing down. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about for the next few minutes, about slowing down. And we live in a hurry culture. We live in a hustle culture. We live in a constantly sort of stimulated environment. So if we're not running fast with our bodies, our brains are moving fast, and they're being more and more distracted every single day. And on top of that, it's like we have to be efficient. We have to be like, what are the corners we can cut so that we can get more done off of our checklist today, right? And so we kind of give into efficiency over presence. And there are times when this is appropriate. Like, if you have a job that by nature is high intensity and is fast paced, it's probably in your best interest to keep up with the pace of the work you have to do while you're at work, yeah? Like, it's like telling a marathon runner, hey, just take your time. Like, there's moments where being fast and efficient, good idea. But if that becomes all of your life, sometimes you might miss something. And what's fascinating is a lot of us maybe have busy kind of roles in our vocations, or maybe in our parenting, or maybe in other ways that we volunteer. But the challenge, I think, for a lot of people is that we take that intensity home with us. We take that intensity everywhere we go with us. And there's not naturally this sort of pause. And the question I think we need to ask today is, what if we paused a little bit more often? We've been in a series called Margin. And what we've been trying to do in this series is just simply say, what if there were spaces in our lives that we could create where we could just sort of exist with God and others in an intentional way? So we talked about silence and solitude. We've talked about Sabbath, simplicity. And today we're going to talk about slowing down. If I'm honest, this is not my forte, okay? So I was telling Lauren last night, I was like, yeah, I'm talking about slowing down, and I'm not like qualified as an expert. You know what I mean? I'm actually going to be sharing with you things I'm reflecting on because I need to apply these to my own life in various ways. And it's just an invitation to say, you know what? All of these things that we've talked about in this series, different ones of us are going to find that we're more naturally inclined or not inclined to them. And it's not about like sort of figuring out how good you are at the things. It's about saying, how can we step one pace forward towards Jesus so that we can pace ourselves through life in a way that notices those he loves, those that we get to be with. So I want to read you a quote. And this is from John Ortberg. He wrote a book years ago called The Life You Always Wanted. And I think this is just super helpful. He said, for many of us, the great danger is not that we will renounce our faith. It is that we will become so distracted and rushed and preoccupied that we settle for a mediocre version of it. We will just skim our lives instead of actually living them. And that's something I want to take with us into this talk this morning. And Ortberg also shares a story in that same book, and he talks about a conversation he had with the late Dallas Willard. And in this conversation, he was in a place in his life where he was taking a job at a very big church, and he was going to be busy. And so he said, Dallas, like, what would you advise if you want to stay spiritually healthy? Like, what could I do? Long pause. And Dallas Willard said this: you must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. John apparently wrote those down and then was like, okay, that's good, thanks. What else? There's nothing else. There's nothing else. You see, what he was getting at is that we become so distracted, and sometimes instead of being distracted, we can actually step into something that's real and right in front of us. And so here's a big idea today. The big idea is this: slowing down my anxious hustle speeds up my spiritual transformation. Speeds up is in quotations there because I'm not trying to say that you can actually calculate this. I'm not trying to say the spiritual journey is something to be rushed. What I'm trying to say is that it's kind of ironic that when we slow down and notice our own sort of internal world, we notice what God is doing in us and through us, we notice the possibilities right around us, that actually it's good for our own ongoing development as a follower of Jesus. And so I want to look at this for a few moments because I think slowing down can make a major impact on all of us depending on our kind of place in the journey. So there's this story in Luke chapter 10. It's a well-known story, but I want to bring our attention to it. Jesus is traveling, and he gets to stay in a home with two sisters, and this is how the story goes. While Jesus and his disciples were traveling, they entered a village where a woman named Martha welcomed him as a guest. She had a sister named Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his message. By contrast, Martha was preoccupied with getting everything ready for their meal. So we have these two sisters, Mary and Martha. We're going to unpack sort of their dynamic here in a moment. But I want to highlight something. First, let's talk about Mary in the story, because I think what we need to notice is that Luke, as he writes this story down, as he's received this tradition about Jesus, wants us to know something very specific about her. She has taken the posture of a disciple. She has taken the posture of, this is my rabbi, and I am his disciple. Now, in the first century world, this is unheard of. Women as disciples just wouldn't compute in the first century world, but Jesus was all about it. And in case we wonder, like, oh, is that a stretch? Like, are we talking about this because it feels nice to talk about women in this way? I want to show you a passage in Acts 22 when the Apostle Paul is talking about his own story as a disciple of a different rabbi. He wrote this in verse 3 of chapter 22 of Acts. I am a Jew, born in Tarsus in Cilicia, but brought up in the city at the feet of Gamaliel, educated strictly according to our ancestral law, being zealous for God, just as all of you are today. So here, again, we have that same formula. Paul says, I sat at the feet of Gamaliel. I sat at the feet of one of the most famous rabbis before I followed Jesus. And so what we see here is that this posture Mary has taken is she is all in that moment on giving her whole self to following this rabbi, to being his disciple. Now, Martha, elsewhere, we actually know that she is a vibrant person of faith. In John's gospel, we see her declare that, Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, right? She is very vibrant. But on this particular occasion, she had work to do and got caught up in the work instead of the possibility in front of her. And, she's anxious. And so what we're going to see is it's not problematic that she wants to serve Jesus and work. Work is good. What's problematic for Jesus is the anxiety embedded under the work that she's doing. And so one other quote here from now John Mark Comer. He wrote The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, which is based on the story we talked about a second ago. If we can slow down both the pace at which we think and the pace at which we move our bodies through the world, maybe we can slow down our souls to a pace at which they can taste and see that the Lord is good. You see, there's an anxiety that takes over our bodies and our brains, and if we can slow down and notice once in a while that we don't need constant stimulation, we don't need to be on our phones when we finally have the moment. I mean, there's so many times in my own life, and I'm sure in some of your lives, where you've had a busy day, you've been working, you've been doing all the stuff, you get home, and it's like, I just want to sit down and do nothing. And so what do you do instead of doing nothing? You open your phone up and you do something, yeah? Isn't it kind of a weird thing that we've learned to do kind of by osmosis in our culture, right? So in those moments when we ought to be doing nothing and slowing our brains down and our bodies down with it, I'm going to scroll a little bit. And there's no judgment about that. It's just simply we need to notice these things because they affect us in the long haul. They affect us. And so we're going to see this in the life of Martha as she is trying to be busy for God. And here's what it says in the following sentence. It says, so Martha came to him and said, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to prepare the table all by myself? Tell her to help me. Have you ever done that with family or something, right? Like you're like working and it's like Thanksgiving meal or something and you're just working and then other relatives show up that should be helping and they're just like, oh, it's good. Hi, how's it going? Oh, yeah. And you're like, why aren't you helping? You ever had that moment? Someone in here has. Yeah. For raising your hand, you get bonus points from the Lord or something. Good job. One person. But no, I mean, this is crazy. Like, we relate to this, right? And people have read this story to just judge Martha. Like, what a bad example Martha must be. Oh my God. Come on. We all do what Martha does, like in different ways, right? Let's call it what it is. And the problem isn't, again, that she's serving. The problem is that she's anxiously serving. And she can't turn off that anxiety mechanism within her that's causing stress and now conflict. You keep going in the story because Jesus is going to answer her. The Lord answered, Martha, Martha, Why are you worried and distracted by many things? One thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the better part, or the better portion, it says in the ancient language. It won't be taken away from her. So the better part, the better thing in this situation was to say, no, I'm going to be a disciple of Jesus. I'm going to sit at his feet. I'm going to learn from him. I don't need to be anxious in Jesus' presence. I need to be present to Jesus' presence. It is very difficult to be present to Jesus' presence when we're running 1 billion miles a minute. And so, as we talk about slowing down my anxious hustle and how it might speed up my spiritual transformation, here's a big idea to add to that. Anxious hurry hinders our capacity to be present to what matters most. Anxious hurry hinders our capacity to be present to what matters most. I'm going to interrupt everything right now. Children, do you see a circle on the screen? Maybe twice. Look at your little booklet. Okay, carrying on. I was told to put that there. So, being with Jesus and serving him, super important, super good. But our capacity to actually do that kind of thing with Jesus, with others, is going to be hindered when the busyness inside of us and the busyness around us takes over. Here's a scholar on this story. I just think it's so good. This is Lucy Pepiot. She reflects on this, and she says, look, both of these women were Jesus' friends and his disciples. Martha's problem wasn't that she was looking after the guests and her sister wasn't. It was that she was fretting. There was an agitation underneath which she took out on her sister. Isn't that familiar? Our nearest and dearest often bear the brunt of our anxiety, resentment, or irritation. Looking after our guests and making sure people are fed are good things. It's not the work, but the underlying worry that's the problem. And Jesus says, what if you slow down and just be present to what matters most right here? To continue the thought, an anxious, fast pace makes it easy to judge others and hard to discern God's presence and priority. An anxious, fast pace makes it easy to judge others and hard to discern the fact that God might be trying to make himself aware in this moment to you and try to make you aware of the priorities in your life. And you're so wrapped up in things that maybe could be set aside. And when I say you're, I'm saying Kurt. I'm saying me. This is hard. Culture conditions us to not be present, to not be aware or attuned to the fact that there is a God who's abiding with you and walks with you and wants you to know him and love. And not only that, but to be empowered to see every moment in front of you with the people that matter the most in front of you, to just be with them. And I'll tell you, it is not always easy. Caught myself this week. Long, tiring day. Kids are playing. I'm in my recliner, as one does. Thank you, Buy Nothing. If you know what that group is, got me a free recliner. It's vintage looking, but it works really well in the back, right? Well, here's the deal. In that moment, I noticed, why am I listening to a YouTube video with one earbud in and kind of not really noticing that I could be sitting with my kids and what they're doing right here? You know what I mean? Like, it's those moments where slowing down isn't just physical, right? Like, slowing down is simply saying, what do I need to do to be more here and regulate my heart, God, regulate my emotions, God, regulate all of those parts of me that are distracted and scattered and moving all over the place. And Help me become more grounded and rooted in this particular moment. Martha struggled to do that. We struggle to do that, but it is possible. So I'm going to give you some ideas. I'm going to give you some practical ways to start training yourself to slow down. And I wanted to start with one that I think is really important. Slow down your commute. Not only is it good for the roads and safety, it might be good for your soul. I tried this a few times this week, and look, this is not my forte, okay? Not my forte at all. In fact, I said, okay, I'm going to drive somewhere. I'm not in a rush in this moment, so I'm going to drive this whole commute under the speed limit and, where possible, get into the far right lane. Can I tell you something? When I got behind that semi truck that was carrying cement or whatever, and it was going 10 under, I was like, dude, do you not, you are ruining my day. I'm trying to be spiritual, and you just got to go at least 5 under, man. You're going 10? You got a lot of muscle in that truck. Show us what it can do, It's hard. But some of us, this might save lives, honestly, but also might just save the internal world of busyness, right? So maybe consider slowing down your commute once in a while and see what that does. Be attuned to it and realize that if you don't actually stay active, I've learned, in that moment saying, I'm slowing down, you accidentally will speed up. It happened a couple of times when I was trying this. So slow down your commute maybe is one way to just start to practice that and notice that Jesus might even be with you in the car. Turn off the noise, the tech stimulation. Maybe when you're at home, resist playing on your phone or listening or watching something kind of like I was sharing. Be present to others instead. Or while commuting, how many of us have to have an audiobook, a podcast, or music on when we're commuting? What if you just went silent once in a while and just noticed the internal stuff that you're holding? Or maybe you need to rearrange the apps on your phone so that you don't actually notice when you're getting notifications right away. You actually have to take another step to actually open Facebook or your email. I took that little red bubble with the numbers. I just took all of them off my phone. I don't know. And by the way, I actually don't get text notifications except from my wife because she wins, right? So that matters. But what can you do to subvert those things that get you trapped in busyness and you don't even notice you're being trapped in busyness? Purposely become inefficient at a task. I had a professor in seminary who would talk about how for him this looked like every morning making oatmeal from scratch and not using instant oatmeal packs. And he would do it on the stove, and he had this whole curated process, and he had to get up early to do it. What could you do that would make you purposely inefficient? And see what happens as you slow down. Cut something so that you can slow down with Jesus. When it comes to spiritual formation, this series and what we're talking about at church, we're going to say, hey, volunteer, get involved, be connected, right? We're always going to say that. Here's what I want you to hear with maybe more clarity than we've said it before. We're saying that, but we are not asking you to do more. We are inviting you to do less so that you can do things that really make a difference. We're not asking you to be busy. We're asking you to evaluate why you're busy and to invest in the kingdom of God, to invest with your life, to invest in relationship, to invest in a way of life that slows down the ancient hustle. So what would this look like for you if you slowed down? How would this change your day? How would this change your life? If you could find the margin that is available to you to be more present to God, to be more present to others, and to be the kind of person you want to be, free of added anxiety. You may not be free of all anxiety, but maybe you can free yourself of stuff that you're just kind of heaping on by default. Whatever it looks like, it could be good. And I'm telling this to you as I tell it to myself, because it's hard. But I think Jesus might be inviting us to be countercultural by slowing things down just a bit. I want to invite you to stand with me, if you would, if you're able, and we're going to pray. The worship team is going to come up and lead us in one last song. Would you pray with me? And so, Jesus, we recognize the reality that everything around us is trying to push us towards faster, quicker, efficiency. Lord, what if we just paused a little bit more often? What if we decided to be people who sit at your feet like Mary and simply said, Jesus, teach me how to do this thing because I don't know if I can do it without you. For anyone in here who holds anxiety, I know that firsthand. I know what that's like too, God. Like, it is hard to turn it off. But if there's anything in our lives that's making that just sort of run in the background, would you just help us to partner with you in doing the things that we can do to slow that down? Jesus, would you make us open to the fact that when we slow down, we see you with greater clarity and we see others as you see them, as infinitely valuable, infinitely worthy of the Son of God dying for them and rising to conquer death for them. So Jesus, we spend this moment as we close giving you all honor that you're due, all praise that you're due. Grateful for the lives that have been transformed among us, grateful for what you're going to continue to do, and grateful that you walk with us wherever we are in our life, wherever we are in our journey, with grace and compassion. So Jesus, we give you this time, and it's in your name we pray. Amen.